James Blake, Friends That Break Your Heart, album review. Let's chat about it. Hey guys, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning. Here to chat about this latest from Mr. James Blake, UK-based singer, songwriter, and one of my favorite modern vocalists. Like, the guy's voice gives me the chills. And in his early days, he excited the hell out of me. Early EPs like Clavier Work and Enough Thunder just showed him as a serious pioneer for this alternative side of R&B that was coming out. And it was clear by his self-titled debut album that he was really onto something. His very smoky, bluesy vocals set amongst these very icy, cold, unforgiving backdrops that dived into everything from modern classical to a little post-dubstep, honestly was a really fresh take on the genre. And while much warmer, much more inviting, and not nearly as experimental, I thought his follow-up album, Overgrown, had some of his best singles on it, like Retrograde and Life Round Here. Now, when it came to the color in anything, I kind of fell off with James for a little while. Look, I initially gave this album a very positive review, and I still think it has a lot of great stuff on it. That track with Bon Iver is still very good, but it also had a lot of experiments that didn't pan out the way that I feel like James really wanted them to. And truthfully, 2019's Assumed Form had me even more in the middle of the road with James Blake. This album attracted a whole lot of new listeners to James's music, but it also alienated a lot more. And honestly, I found myself in the middle. I thought collaborations with the likes of Travis Scott and Rosalia were some of James's best to date. And I commended his more, sort of hip-hop, sort of hipper sound that he was going for here. I thought it was interesting. But something about the album also kind of disappointed me, To me, James didn't seem like as much of a pioneer as well as just like a follower. But I was very intrigued by these new singles leading up to this album. I thought it sounded like James was getting more back to his experimental roots. But I'm still kind of in the middle of the road on the modern James Blake sound. Now, there is a lot of material on here that I feel like if you are a James Blake fan, and you've been a James Blake fan, that you'll probably like a good hunk of this album. Famous last words, it is a gorgeous, stunning intro. I love how bluesy it is, and I'm always gonna love just hearing his steamy, very smoky vocals up against a very bare backdrop. It brings me back to what I liked about his music in his early days. I love the bulky production, the subtle beat, the atmosphere here. Not only that, but James sounds truly heartbroken, and a sad James Blake is always a good James Blake on tape. Like I said, if you are a fan of James's music from any era, this is mandatory listening, and you're gonna like it probably. On the other hand, Life Is Not the Same. Honestly, I think this is one of the best deep cuts here. This sounds like Overgrown era James Blake. The vocals are huge. I love the sweeping melodies here, and I just love how overwhelmingly gorgeous this comes off. This reminds me of what brought me to James's music to begin with, once again, and honestly amped me up to listen to the rest of this album. And as far as a collaboration goes, I think Coming Back featuring SZA is one of the best ones here. I love how graceful and tender it is. It's moments like this that I take a step back and I remember just who the hell we're dealing with here. The subtle beat here is very sharp, and much like his collaborations with Travis Scott and Rosalia on his last album, I feel like this is a very hip choice for James. I feel like this is a very, good current sound for him. Not only that, but I feel like him and SZA have genuine chemistry. I'm So Blessed Your Mind, on the other hand, this isn't anything outside the block. Watch that. I'm So Blessed Your Mind, on the other hand, this is nothing out of the box for James Blake. Absolutely nothing out of the box, but he performs the hell out of this track. It sounds awesome. His vocals are so incredibly smooth and sweet here. And the bubbly left field beat, it's a little out of the box. It is, so I guess it is a little bit out of a box of a track. It's a little experimental, and that's nice. I hate to say it though, well, not the worst thing I've heard this year. As far as James Blake's stuff goes in 2021, me and him can't seem to get on the same page still. Funeral, I want to hear this track and run as far as I can. I get that this is supposed to be a broke down, tragic kind of track, and the bonus track, the alternate version with Slow Tie, is a much more interesting tune. This beat on this one is completely dime a dozen, and his vocals, while stunning at times, or just not enough to carry it. Then we have Frozen featuring Suave and JID. This is one of the most awkward collaborations I've heard all year. After hearing him work with some more hip-hop production and more hip-hop collaborators on Assume Form 2 years ago, I thought this would be a lot more interesting than it actually was. This beat, it does nothing for me, and JID and Suave don't have any chemistry, especially not with James Blake on this track. It does nothing for me. I had a lot of hope for Foot Forward, mostly because it's a Metro Boomin track, and once again, James and Metro have had chemistry in the past. This isn't it though. The beat just seems out of place, and for me, I feel like this track doesn't go far enough. And Show Me is just really frustrating. This track features Monica Martin. It's just very average. Truthfully, his vocal performance on this track, it's incredible. I mean, it's James Blake. The guy's got an unbelievable voice, and he shows it off here. His performance is great. It's so bluesy and lonely and cold. But my God, the rest of this track is just so friggin' boring. And Monica Martin's vocals, too, they're pretty moving as well. But nothing else about this track truly moves me. So sadly, overall, yeah, I kind of wish that this album was better. I mean, it's not the worst thing I've heard. Not even the worst thing I've heard from him, but it's just such a mixed bag. Say what you will, though, honestly, this track is still a really fantastic single. This is sad boy James Blake at his best. His vocals are so tragic and so bruised. And truthfully, it is a little safe in a weird way. Like, it's nothing wildly outside the box. But I still think it's incredibly classy, and his falsettos by the end of this track are unbelievable. And Lost Angel Nights, honestly, this is the experiment of a track that I wish we heard more of. The heavily affected vocals, the beat here, so freaking cosmic and somber all at the same time. And yes, it's not maybe the wildest or most forward-thinking track we've heard from James Blake, but for an experiment on an album in this day and age from him, honestly, yeah, I'm all for it. And then I hear tracks like Friends That Break Your Heart. It is incredibly frustrating. Some of the lyrics on this track are some of the biggest statements James makes on this entire album. I commend that. But his vocals are far from where you would expect to hear, and they are very much so a letdown. And this instrumental is even more frustrating. And then we have If I'm Insecure as a finale, and I have the exact opposite issues. This instrumental, this atmosphere, it is thick. As far as I'm concerned, it's vocally and lyrically that I feel like this track really stumbled. And it rolls on for over 5 minutes. And it gets so freaking huge and gorgeous by the end of it. I don't know, just the pieces aren't here. This is a very middle-of-the-road album from James Blake in 2021. And it's weird because he's more of a household name than ever. He has more famous friends than ever and brings on really interesting collaborators on here. And when he hits it right, my freaking God, does James Blake ever know what he's doing in the world of alternative R&B. But 10 years ago, this guy was an undisputed pioneer of these genres, and now, honestly, he kind of sounds like a follower, and that's kind of sad. It's a very mixed bag of an album. I'm feeling a decent 6 on this album, but let me know what you guys think down below. If you liked the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, guys.